Hello friends, shall we watch another video? Have you ever wondered what history has never told us about Africa? What ancient secrets lie dormant in the shadows of forgotten temples and symbols that have endured for millennia? Today, we embark on a journey connecting gods, kings, peoples, and ancestral spirits, revealing mysteries that defy time and human memory. Imagine hearing the whispers of ancestral guardians, feeling the pulse of invisible temples, and realizing that each symbol, each ritual, carries the energy of centuries of wisdom. Did the ancient gods truly walk among us? And what if what we believe to be mythology is merely the tip of a lost knowledge? In this story, you will discover how signs, dreams, and even fire itself hold messages that modern men have forgotten to listen to. It is a journey through the visible and the invisible, through the past that shaped the present, and through what still awaits awakening within each human being. Before we continue, I want to know, are you already subscribed to the channel? If not, take this opportunity to subscribe, leave a like, and comment on where in the world you are watching this ancient story from. With each gesture, you help keep alive the echoes of wisdom that history has tried to silence. Prepare to immerse yourself in a universe where ancestry, mythology, and spirituality intertwine, where each step reveals a forgotten truth, and each breath brings you closer to the sacred that has always been within your reach. There are places where the wind still speaks, even when men forget to listen. Beneath the parched soil of ancient African lands, stories sleep that time tried to bury. Stones engraved with indecipherable symbols, drums echoing ancient memories. Everything seems to whisper a language no longer spoken, but which still vibrates in every particle of sand. It was as if the earth itself held the breath of the gods, waiting for the right moment to exhale the past once more. The elders used to say that the earth never forgets, it only observes in silence. And when the silence becomes too heavy, it transforms into sound. It was in this way that, amidst ruins and dust, the winds began to carry murmurs of something awakening. A voiceless song, a nameless call, traversing centuries and civilizations. The shadows of the past seemed to move, reminding humanity that not everything that was buried remained dead. Amidst the desert heat and the golden glow of dusk, some travelers claimed to hear voices rising from the ground. Soft sounds, like forgotten prayers, mingled with the crackling air. They were ancient echoes, perhaps laments, perhaps longings for an era when humankind still walked side by side with the divine. Each step stirred not only dust, but also memories, as if the spirits of the dunes silently observed the return of the curious. In the most remote villages, griots and priests spoke of a time when the sky was closer and the spiritual world breathed alongside the human one. They recounted that, when the heart of Africa beat strongly again, the voices of the gods would be heard once more. And now, centuries later, some swear that this sound is beginning to pulse again, not in the mountains, but within the people who still dream of the lost truth. Something awakens. Perhaps it's the wind, perhaps the very memory of the world. The stars seem to twinkle more brightly, as if recognizing what is to come. The dust dances in spirals, and for a moment, the air seems to vibrate with ancient life. Some say that when the earth speaks, time bends to listen, and it is in that instant that the forgotten begins to remember. Before the world learned to name the sacred, the sound of creation already existed in Africa. There, where the sun rises majestically and sets reverently, the first breath of life was heard. The waters of the Nile and the Niger held the memory of the gods, and each stone, each tree, seemed to know the secret of existence. The ancient peoples knew, the divine did not dwell in the distant sky, but in the very ground that sustained their steps. Between golden savannas and deep forests, the tribes raised their prayers to the sound of drums that mimicked the heart of the earth. There was no separation between man and the sacred. Both were made of the same dust, the same spark of light. Fire, rain, thunder. Everything was a sign of spiritual presence. In those lands, the invisible did not frighten. It was the everyday, the breath that kept the world in balance. The elders said that the gods walked among men, disguised as wind, river, or child. And when one of them spoke, the entire universe listened. It was there that the first laws of harmony were born, the rituals of fertility, the offerings to life and death. Every gesture, every song, was a conversation with the cosmos. And from this ancient dialogue, humanity learned to hear the silence of things. But, over time, man began to forget the voice of the earth. He built walls, erected stone temples, and distanced himself from the heart that made him beat in unison with the universe. Yet, in the oldest villages, the drum did not fall silent. It beat firmly, reminding us that the divine had not gone away. It only waits for man to listen to it again. They say that when the drum beats at midnight, time bends and the past awakens. It is the call of the ancients, the echo of an origin that was never lost. Africa, cradle of the world and of the spirit, breathes in every sound, in every color, in every memory. And as this voice is reborn, an ancient promise seems about to be fulfilled. There was a time when silence was not natural, but forced. The brilliance of traditions began to be extinguished by hands that did not understand their power. Foreigners arrived with their crosses, flags, and promises, bringing not only new beliefs but also fear. The songs of the ancestors were called witchcraft, and the ancient gods, demons. Thus, what was sacred was pushed into the shadows of history itself. The villages, once filled with songs and laughter, saw their drums fall silent. Books were burned, symbols forbidden, names erased. The spiritual world, which once flowed freely, was chained by foreign words and rigid dogmas. And yet, under the gaze of the conquerors, the elders kept secrets, hiding in gestures and songs what they could no longer say aloud. With each generation, the forgetting deepened, like roots buried in dry soil. Children learned stories that weren't their own, and the memories of their gods became distant legends. Yet, something persisted, a small fire, burning in the souls of those who refused to forget. This fire passed from mother to child, from song to whisper, keeping alive an invisible spark. But imposed oblivion does not destroy what has been engraved in the spirit. What is true sleeps, but does not die. Beneath the ruins of time, ancient echoes waited. They awaited the moment when pain would transform into longing, and longing into a quest. Because every imposition carries a price. The more one tries to silence the truth, the stronger it prepares to return. And now, centuries later, there are signs that this return is drawing near. Strange winds blow across the ancient lands, and mysterious dreams haunt those who still hear. Perhaps oblivion was not the end, but merely a pause before awakening. They say the spiritual world never truly sleeps, it merely rests, waiting for the right sound to awaken. And that sound began to echo again, soft as the wind in the ancient palm leaves. Strange dreams, visions, and omens began to visit people in distant places, uniting them by a single feeling, that something forgotten is calling. It was as if the heart of Africa, asleep for centuries, was beginning to beat once more. With each drumbeat, in each song of longing, a memory was reborn. People began to rediscover rituals, ancient words, symbols carved in stone that now seemed to shine under the sun. The past, once treated as myth, breathed again through the bodies and faith of the living. The awakening was not only religious, but also spiritual, cultural, and ancestral. A reconnection between the visible and the invisible. People began to understand that the calling did not come from outside, but from within. The true temple was in the spirit, and the altar in the heart. The ancient teachings were manifesting themselves again in small things. In respect for the earth, in harmony with time, in listening to nature. It was as if the gods, tired of waiting, had decided to whisper directly into the ears of those who still know how to feel. And so, forgotten symbols began to reappear in dreams, paintings, and even in the modern beats of the streets. Art became a mirror of the invisible, and each color, a call. It was the past using new voices to tell old truths. Those who once doubted began to wonder, why do these signs emerge now, when the world seems more lost than ever? Perhaps the symbolic awakening is not an event, but a reminder. A reminder that nothing is truly lost. It merely changes form, waiting for the right moment to be remembered. And as time turns in its eternal cycle, some say that the ancients are rising again, not in temples of stone, but in the souls that call them by name. In the times when the sky still conversed with the earth, the gods walked among men. Olorum, Lord of the beginning and the end, observed the balance of the world with eyes of eternity. Mawu, the goddess who wove day and night, spun the threads of destiny between her fingers of light. There was also Osiris, who knew the secret of life after death, and Enkai, the spirit who made the rain fall as a blessing upon the fertile soil. Each of them held a power, a mystery, a story engraved in the breath of the universe. These gods were not distant, nor did they live behind unreachable veils. They were in the waters, in the fire, in the mountains, and in the human heart. Olorum inhabited the breath of creation. Mawu hid in the full moon. Osiris rested in the cycle of life, and Enkai smiled in every drop that fell from the sky. Ancient peoples knew that the divine did not dwell in temples, but in simple gestures, in the gaze, in the song, in love, and in the courage to exist. Over time, the names changed, but the presences remained. In every corner of Africa, the deities manifested themselves with different faces and voices, like reflections of the same light. Orishas, Vodans, Netjeru, and Kisis, there were many, but they came from a single source. They all represented the same link between man and the infinite. And even when they tried to erase their names, the gods found refuge in the hearts of those who still believed. On silent nights, priests and dreamers recounted encounters with figures of pure energy, beings who came in dreams, bringing messages of balance and resilience. Some said that the gods never left. They merely hid behind human eyes, awaiting the moment of awakening. Others claimed that when humanity rediscovered its own essence, the gods would return in the form of wisdom and courage. And now, as ancient voices echo once more, some feel the presence of these spirits again, not as distant apparitions, but as a living force within each awakened soul. They say that the breath of Olorum has touched the world again, and that the return of the gods is only the beginning of something much greater. They say the gods speak through signs, and that when man learns to see beyond the obvious, the invisible becomes evident. Among ancient stones and forgotten manuscripts, symbols that never cease to pulsate reappear. The Ankh, the cross of eternal life, recalls the link between body and spirit. The Eye of Horus, vigilant and protective, represents the awakening of consciousness. And the Sankofa, the bird that looks back as it moves forward, teaches that it is necessary to return to one's origins in order to move forward. These symbols, scattered throughout temples, tombs, and textiles, were not mere ornaments, they were keys. Keys that opened doors to understanding, bridges between worlds. Each stroke, each curve, carried power. When the initiate traced them with intention, the air changed. It was as if the universe itself listened. And those who understood their meaning saw not only drawings, but felt ancient vibrations, capable of altering the course of the soul. Time passed, and the modern world tried to forget. But the symbols returned, engraved on skins, dreamed by artists, revealed in meditations and visions. The same code that guided pharaohs and priests now resurfaces among those seeking reconnection. Not as a fashion, but as a reminder. What was once in temples now lives in the streets, on screens, in words that cross the ocean. Some claim that these signs appear when the world is about to change, that the Ankh begins to shine in the dreams of the sensitive, and that the awakened eye silently observes the steps of humanity. Others say that the symbols are not returning. It is we who are beginning to see them again. And when the gaze awakens, the forgotten is revealed. There is a dormant power in these forms, something that transcends time and borders. Whoever understands them, understands themselves. Because every symbol is a mirror, and every mirror reflects what was hidden. And perhaps, just perhaps, these ancient signs are trying to tell us something the world is not yet ready to hear. When memory fades, the body becomes the first altar. This is how remembrance rituals were born. Dances, chants, offerings, and drums that kept the connection to the sacred alive. Under the moonlight or the blazing sun, people gathered to repeat ancient gestures, guided by the strength of their ancestors. Each movement was a prayer, each beat a call. And when their feet touched the ground, the spiritual world responded in vibrations that only the heart could understand. These rituals served not only to honor gods, but also to remember who one is. Around the fire, men and women purified themselves with the sound of the drums, freeing their souls from the chains of forgetfulness. Rhythm was the language of the invisible. The more the drums resonated, the more the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds disappeared. It was a reunion between what was and what still is. The elders taught that remembering was not about thinking about the past, but about reliving it, with the body, with breath, with the soul. And so, each ritual became a bridge between times, a link between the living and the dead, between the visible and what only the spirit perceives. It was the ancestral way of saying to the universe, "We are still here. We still remember who we are." Even in times when faith was forbidden, communities found ways to keep their rites hidden. They changed names, mixed symbols, disguised dances. But the meaning remained intact, guarded in the calloused hands of the griots and the voices of the priestesses. It was the best-kept secret, that of continuity. And now, in times of reunion, these rituals flourish again like ancient seeds awakening in the rain. Young and old dance once more under the same sky, feeling that the drum is not just sound, it is the heart of the gods calling home. And with each beat, a portal seems to open. Between the shadows of time and the echoes of drums, there were those who not only remembered, they preserved. They were the masters of the invisible, the bearers of words that could not be written. They were called griots, priests, elders, or simply guardians. Their voices were bridges between worlds, weaving the past, present, and future into a single thread of ancestral wisdom. The guardians did not accumulate power, they accumulated memory. They knew the true names of the gods, the formulas of fire and healing, the secrets of the symbols that unite man with the earth. Many lived in isolation, in clay temples or under sacred trees, far from profane eyes. Others walked among the people, disguised as storytellers, spreading knowledge disguised as legends. They said their eyes saw beyond the visible, that they could read time as one reads sand moved by the wind. And when they spoke, the world seemed to fall silent, for their words carried the weight of what was said before creation. These guardians knew that true knowledge does not belong to one man alone, but to the collective spirit of a people. Therefore, they protected it not with walls, but with mystery. Many secrets were hidden in chants, in drawings engraved on stones, in ceremonial masks, and in the very names of the gods. Each symbol, each gesture, was a key. But times changed, and silence almost prevailed. Many guardians disappeared, pursued by empires, churches, and conquerors. However, what is sacred is never lost. It only transforms. Their teachings traveled in memories, in songs, in prayers disguised as chants. Today, new voices are beginning to echo. They are the spiritual heirs of the ancient guardians, young people, scholars, priestesses, modern griots, awakening the wisdom dormant in the roots of the continent. They do not seek to create something new, but to remind the world of what it has forgotten, that true wisdom is not found in books, but in the souls of the people who have learned to listen to the earth. Between the visible and the invisible, there is a language that needs no voice, the language of symbols. Each stroke, each shape, each color has a spirit and an intention. In ancient African civilizations, symbols were not mere decorations, they were portals. The Adinkra of the Akan, the hieroglyphs of Kemet, the Dogon signs, all held messages intended only for eyes that knew how to see. Symbols were spiritual keys. Some opened paths of protection, others revealed wisdom, and still others invoked the presence of ancestors. A single design could contain an entire philosophy, a secret about creation, or a veiled warning. They connected humankind to the cosmos, reminding us that the language of the divine is made of forms, not words. The ancient masters taught that the symbol is alive. It awakens only in those who understand it with their hearts. Therefore, its meanings varied according to the initiate. For one, it would be just a drawing. For another, a revelation. The same circle that represents the sun is also the eye of God, the cycle of life, and the soul's return to its origin. Over the centuries, many of these symbols were banished, erased, or reinterpreted by other empires. But their power never disappeared. It persisted in the weaves of fabrics, the patterns of masks, ritual dances, and the hidden designs in temples and ancient stones. Each symbol survived as a fragment of what was forgotten. And now, as the modern world attempts to rediscover the spiritual, the ancient signs reappear. They silently call to those who still listen. For symbols do not speak to the intellect, they speak to the soul. And when the soul recognizes its own language, the forgotten awakens. In the heart of the vast African continent, where the sun touches the earth like a divine fire, beats the heart of origin. There, amidst dense forests and rivers that seem like mirrors of time, it is said that life began. Before empires, before kings and names, there was only the rhythm of the earth, the primordial drum that echoed within each being. And it was from this sound that the world was born. The ancients called this meeting point, the place where the sky bends. It was the axis of the sacred, where the gods walked among men and where the spirits of nature spoke in wind and thunder. Mountains were temples, rivers were veins of the Creator, and each tree held the memory of an ancestral soul. The continent was not merely territory. It was a living, conscious, and eternal being. Kings and priests knew that governing without listening to the heart of the earth was like trying to breathe without lungs. Therefore, every important decision was preceded by listening rituals. Men and women gathered in silence, waiting for the earth to reveal its will. It was a way of maintaining the balance between the visible and the invisible, between power and harmony. But, as the millennia passed, the heart began to be silenced. Strangers arrived, lands were carved up, peoples separated. Yet, the pulse never ceased. Beneath every ruin, every desert and forest, it continues to vibrate, like a heart that refuses to stop beating, awaiting the moment when it will be heard again. Some say that this heart still speaks in dreams, in visions, in subtle calls that many ignore. Others claim that it awakens in every human being who seeks their true origin. And perhaps, it is in this return to the primordial sound that humanity will rediscover the lost path, the path back home. The elders say that there was a time when the gods walked the earth, and the winds whispered their names. But the world changed. The faith of men began to weaken, and the link between heaven and earth cracked like dried clay. Then, the gods looked at each other and understood that the time of crossing had come, the moment to retreat into the shadows of time, waiting for humans to rediscover the sound of the sacred. The temples fell silent, the bonfires were extinguished, and the songs became legends. But the crossing was not an abandonment. It was a cycle, a metamorphosis. Each deity, once alive in the body of the earth, transformed into a symbol, into energy, into a dream. Thus, the gods did not die. They merely dissolved into the wind, the waters, and the hearts of those who still remember. In the silence that followed, the world faded into oblivion. The sacred voices were replaced by new creeds, new crowns, and new languages. Yet, on the riverbanks and on full moon nights, the people still heard the distant echo of the ancient names. It was as if the universe itself whispered that nothing is truly lost, it merely changes form. Some wise men recounted that, upon crossing to the other side, the gods promised a return, an awakening. When humanity once again heeded the call of the earth and respected the rhythm of the stars, they would emerge again, not as entities, but as awakened consciousness within each being. It was the harbinger of a new spiritual dawn. And perhaps that is why, even amidst modernity and oblivion, so many still dream of golden figures, of kingdoms of light, and of ancient voices calling their names. Perhaps these are not just dreams. Perhaps they are memories, fragments of the gods' journey, awaiting the right time to reveal themselves again. When the silence of the gods fell upon the earth, something ancient awoke from the depths of the unseen. These were the ancestral guardians, spirits of light and shadow who had sworn to protect the wisdom of the ancient world until humanity was ready to remember. They did not speak with words, but with signs, the flight of a bird, the sound of a distant drum, the sudden feeling of déjà vu that crosses the soul. These guardians were not of flesh, but of essence. They lived between dimensions, observing, waiting. It was believed that each human lineage guarded a guardian, a spirit that whispered secrets through blood and memory. And when someone heard this call, life was never the same again, for it was the beginning of a reconnection with the forgotten sacred. The ancient priests said that the guardians were the link between the past and the future. They kept alive the flame of the original teachings, those that united science and spirit, body and cosmos. Through dreams, symbols, and coincidences, they guided seekers, testing their courage and purity of intention. Only those who shed their ego could hear them clearly. But there was a danger. Those who tried to master this power without understanding its purpose ended up being consumed by it. Therefore, the calling was not for everyone, only for those who saw with the eyes of the heart. The guardians did not seek servants, but rather reminders, those capable of carrying the fire of wisdom without letting it go out. And even today, they say that the winds of the Sahara, the waters of the Nile, and the mountains of the Congo still hold their echoes. Every thunderclap, every shadow, every pulse of the earth can be a subtle reminder that the guardians never left. They only wait for humanity to finally awaken to hear them again. Among Africa's oldest traditions, fire was never just heat or light. It was the breath of the gods, the flame that separated chaos from creation. In every village, There was a fire that never went out, maintained by chosen hands, heirs to a silent pact between heaven and earth. It was believed that as long as that flame remained alive, the bond between the worlds would also remain awake. The elders taught that the sacred fire burns not only wood, but also fear, doubt, and inner darkness. It transforms, purifies, and reveals. During rituals, men and women gathered around the flame, singing in ancient languages, dancing to the rhythm of drums that imitated the beating of the universe's heart. It was there that the visible and the invisible touched. Many travelers, coming from distant lands, witnessed these rites and did not understand what they saw. To them, it was merely superstition. But the initiates knew. The fire was a consciousness, a portal that spoke in crackles and glimmers. They said that whoever gazed intently at it with a quiet mind could see the gods reflected in the flames, or the very reflection of their own soul. There are stories of flames that never went out, even in the rain, and of bonfires lit by blue thunderbolts descending from the sky on initiation nights. These tales cross generations, weaving a mystery that defies time and reason. For fire does not belong to man. Man belongs to fire. He is the guardian of memory, the mirror of the divine spark that dwells in every being. And even today, in many forgotten villages and temples, the sacred fire continues to burn in silence. It is not seen by all, but felt by those who have learned to see with their spirit. Because as long as the fire burns, the gods will never truly be absent, only waiting in the light that dances among the shadows. They say that, before words, the world spoke through the spirit. Every sound, every gesture, every breath of wind was a form of communication between the visible and invisible realms. In ancient African lands, priests didn't just study human languages, they learned to listen to the subtle languages of the universe. It was the language of the drum, of fire, of water, and of breath. A language that cannot be written, but felt. Spiritual masters taught that the spirit speaks through signs, and that the body is its instrument. A shiver, a dream, an improbable coincidence, everything could be a message. The problem is that modern man, distracted by the noise of the world, has forgotten how to listen. But ancient peoples knew. When the heart is silent, even silence speaks. In certain rituals, initiates would enter a trance and interpret what the wind was saying. The drum served as a bridge, beating in the same rhythm as the earth, opening portals between worlds. Each beat was a word, each pause, a meaning. This was how oracles and diviners understood destiny, not as something fixed, but as a continuous dialogue with the universe. Many travelers who witnessed these ceremonies returned confused, unable to understand how a people without writing could possess such wisdom. But what they failed to understand is that the spirit never needed letters. It speaks in the dance of the leaves, in the murmur of the rivers, and in the sparkle of the eyes. True language has always been energy in motion. And even today, that ancestral language still resonates in heartbeats, in recurring dreams, and in the signs that cross the path of those seeking meaning. The spirit continues to speak, but few still know how to listen. But when someone remembers, communication begins again, and the invisible whispers once more what time tried to silence. Long before they erected stones and columns, ancient peoples already knew of invisible temples, sacred places that did not exist in matter, but in spirit. They were constructions of energy, erected by faith, vibration, and communion between beings. There, the ground was the heart, the ceiling was the sky, and the walls were formed by songs and prayers that floated between worlds. The elders said that each person carries a temple within themselves, and that visiting this inner space is the true path of initiation. There are no altars or images, only the encounter with one's own spirit. And it is in this sacred silence that one can hear the voice of the gods, echoing like an ancient memory that begs to be remembered. For centuries, priests and healers gathered in circles, eyes closed, feeling the same pulse, the same flow. Together, they formed temples of light, invisible to ordinary eyes, but powerful enough to move mountains and heal wounds that medicine could not see. The power did not come from outside. It came from the alignment between the human and the divine. Over time, stone constructions emerged, and the sacred was imprisoned within walls. Temples became territories, and faith a domain. But the ancients knew that the true altar was never made of gold, but of energy. That the real temple is not visited, it is awakened. And this awakening begins when the soul bows before its own essence. Today, there are still those who walk through concrete cities and, amidst the noise, find the invisible temple. These are the ones who remember, even without knowing how, that the connection with the divine does not depend on place, but on presence. For where there is silence and intention, the sacred is reborn, even if no one sees it. Long before golden crowns and ivory thrones, there were the kings of light, sovereigns who ruled not with swords, but with wisdom. It is said that their crowns were invisible and that their authority came from inner radiance, not earthly power. They understood that true kingship was self-mastery, and that the greatness of a people was born from the harmony between body, soul, and earth. These kings were not chosen by inheritance, but by spiritual merit. They underwent ancient rites where they had to prove they had mastered fear, pride, and desire. Only then did they receive the right to rule, not over men, but over destinies. And every decision they made was guided by the counsel of the elders and the silent voice of the gods. It is said that their kingdoms shone at night, bathed in a bluish light emanating from the center of the temples. This luminosity was neither flame nor sun. It was the energy of spiritual knowledge itself. Under it, they healed illnesses, taught science, and spoke with the stars. Many believe that the kings of light were the first astronomers and that their celestial maps contained secrets about the origin of humanity. But time brought ambition, and the light began to fade. Wars and invasions obscured the brilliance of the ancient thrones, and the kings of light were forgotten, transformed into myths. Only symbols remained: golden discs, sculptures of radiant eyes, fragments of texts that speak of sovereigns who ruled the visible and the invisible. Still, some say that the blood of these kings still runs among us. In silent leaders, in masters who don't seek applause, in people who bring a different kind of gleam to their eyes. For true reign never ends. It merely changes form, waiting for the right moment to awaken again and rekindle the inner throne of every human being. For the ancient Africans, time was not a straight line. It was a circle that folds back on itself, like a snake biting its own tail. Within this cycle, the ancestors never truly depart. They move between the ages, whispering through the winds, the waters, and the dreams. Therefore, each birth was seen as a return, and each death, merely a passage to another way of existing. The wise men said that there are forgotten lineages, direct descendants of the first gods and kings, scattered throughout the world. Lineages that inherited not riches, but memories, fragments of a power dormant in the blood. Some call it intuition, others destiny. But those who feel it know, it is the call of time, asking the children of light to awaken again. Many desert travelers spoke of hidden peoples, guardians of this legacy, living in unreachable mountains or valleys where time seems to stand still. There, the sun rises twice, once in the sky, and again within the soul. These peoples do not write their stories, because they carry them on their skin, in their eyes, and in their songs. Each word spoken is an ancestral memory reborn. Modern archaeologists have found signs of these lineages in unlikely places. Identical symbols in distant pyramids, similar amulets in cultures that never met. Coincidence? Perhaps. But, for the initiated, it is proof that time is a mirror, reflecting the same truth under different faces. The past and the present dance to the same rhythm. And when someone, somewhere in the world, feels their heart beat faster when faced with an old story, perhaps it's because their blood has recognized its echo. Because sometimes it's not the mind that remembers, it's the soul. And these echoes, coming from the depths of time, continue to call out, like distant drums announcing that something forgotten is about to awaken. The earth does not forget. Every stone, every river, every root carries memories that go back to the first steps of humanity. The ancient Africans knew this and taught that the earth is alive, and that within it lie the secrets of gods and men. When one walks attentively, one feels the pulse of this memory, as if the very soil were breathing in harmony with the soul. Many traditions speak of a return of the spirit, a moment when the forgotten and the ancient reunite. This return is not merely symbolic. It is the awakening of a consciousness that recognizes its origin. In temples, mountains, or forests, initiates feel the presence of ancestral forces, as if time were merely a veil that opens before those who know how to listen. Rivers, which carry water from heaven and earth, serve as conduits for this return. In them, the ancients saw reflections of their own souls and of the gods who inhabited them. Each reflection was a lesson, each current a warning. Whoever learns to listen to the voice of the water also learns to listen to their own life and the secrets that the world insists on hiding. The wind also becomes a messenger. It blows differently for each person, bringing forgotten memories, recollections of lineages, and echoes of ancient songs. Those who walk attentively realize that the spirit of the earth speaks in subtle signs, and that understanding these signs is the first step towards a true reunion with the sacred. And so, the memory of the earth continues to pulsate, silent and firm, waiting for each awakened soul to remember its place in the world. For the return of the spirit is not merely an act of the past. It is an invitation for the present to reconnect with eternity, and for the forgotten to finally find their voice. In the silent night, when the world sleeps, dreams become invisible portals. Ancient Africans believed that, during sleep, the soul could travel beyond time and space, encountering ancestors, gods, and forgotten secrets. Each dream was a bridge, a delicate thread connecting the present to the past, and those who knew how to interpret its images could discover what was hidden from the ordinary eye. Many accounts speak of encounters with luminous figures, sacred animals, or guardian spirits who offered advice and warnings. These were experiences that transcended fear and logic, teaching that not everything in the world can be measured with hands or eyes. There are truths that can only be felt with the heart. Thus, dreams were lessons, maps, and oracles all at once. Some recurring symbols in dreams, such as rivers, trees, birds, or stones, were understood as messages from ancestors. Each shape, color, or movement carried teachings and warnings. Initiates learned to record these signs and use them to guide decisions, heal, protect communities, and keep alive the memory of those who came before. And it wasn't just about individual experience. Dreams could unite peoples. In community gatherings, nighttime stories were shared, songs were composed, and rituals were inspired by what had been seen. Thus, ancestral wisdom was perpetuated, crossing generations like an invisible thread that never breaks. Even today, it is said that dreams remain secret portals. Those who pay attention can perceive ancient echoes among images and feelings, receiving, in the quiet of the night, the call of forgotten lineages. For, in dreams, the past and the present dance together, whispering that ancestry never truly left. They say that, at some point, the world will feel a collective calling, a dormant memory that crosses continents and generations. It is the final awakening, when all of humanity begins to realize that it is not separate from the sacred, from the earth, or from its ancestors. Each being is a spark of creation, and each conscious step is a reunion with the light that the ancient gods left in the world. The stories told by the griots, the symbols engraved in forgotten temples, the rituals and songs, everything converges on this moment. It's as if the entire universe breathes in unison, inviting each person to look inward and recognize the divinity that has always been hidden beneath routine and forgetfulness. And those who listen realize, the past never truly left, it was merely waiting for the right time to reveal itself. Awakening is neither immediate nor uniform. Some feel it first in dreams, others in contact with nature, in music, in dance, or in the simple silence of meditation. Each experience is a step on the soul's journey, reminding us that true transformation comes from within and reverberates outward, touching communities, cultures, and the planet itself. And so, the ancient cycle is complete. What once seemed lost returns in energy, consciousness, and memory. Humanity realizes that it inherits not only bodies and stories, but also the sacred mysteries that shape civilizations, kings, and gods. Every conscious gesture, every choice aligned with the greater good, rekindles the ancestral bond that was never broken. And when the last veil dissipates, the certainty arises that the journey does not end, it merely changes form. For the final awakening is also the beginning of a new era, where the wisdom of forgotten gods and the memory of ancestors live within each being. And perhaps, in every awakened heart, the world will once again hear the true sound of the sacred, silent, profound, and eternal. And so, we come to the end of this journey, but not the end of the story. The forgotten gods, the invisible temples, and the ancient symbols remain alive within every soul that remembers, feels, and seeks to reconnect with ancestral wisdom. The past has not been lost. It merely awaits to be awakened. Every ritual, every dream, and every sign that transcends time reminds us that we are part of something greater, that the memory of the earth, the pulse of the ancestors, and the energy of the sacred still guide the paths of humanity, and that, by listening to these echoes, we can transform not only our present, but also the future we are about to create. May this story serve as an invitation. Look within, listen to the whispers of the invisible, and allow the light of the ancients to awaken within you. Humanity's journey is also your own journey, and each conscious step rekindles the link with all that has always been sacred. If you connected with this narrative, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the next stories and revelations about the hidden wisdom of ancient African civilizations. Each new video is a portal to rediscovering the past and understanding the force that shapes our present. Remember, the forgotten gods still walk among us, and true discovery lies with those who have the courage to listen.